All right. We're about to get started. The MC is on the mic. Mic check, 1, 2. Yo. Nah, I'll start rapping. So thank you everybody for coming out. So I'm gonna do my part real quick. If you don't know who I am, I'm DivineProspect. I'm the founder of and overseer of KHM. I started KHM back in 2014. And really didn't know what direction to go with it. And the Most High woke me up and told me that I have to speak to my people. So I said, okay, let's speak to our people, right? And then in 2015 is when I found out about this program, and this is where we're at today. So almost 10 years I've been teaching about this online. Every year I've done an event and or a lecture in regards to this information, all right? All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Can you check the chat real quick? Make sure they can hear me, everything's good, they can see. All right, chat, if you can hear, you can see, everything's good, hit 1. If you can hear, you can see, and everything's good, hit 1, all right? Can you see the screen? Is the text legible? It's legible? Okay. All right, so let's get started, all right?
Well, some good ships are prepared to go into the United Nations at this point and ask that charges be brought against the United States for its treatment of American Negroes. Oh, yes. Hey, the audience will have to be quiet. Yes, as I pointed out when I was during my traveling, that nations look, African nations and Asian nations and Latin American nations look very hypocritical when they stand up in the United Nations condemning the racist practices of South Africa and that which is practiced by Portugal.
This is very important right here.
And saying nothing in the UN about the racist practices that are manifest every day against Negroes in this society. Even in South Africa, those Africans are faced with bayonets and I'm faced with police dogs. And when I was in Beirut, I saw a picture on the front page of a Negro being beaten in Tennessee, on the front page of the paper in Beirut. When I got to Cairo, I saw the same picture of a Negro being beaten in Tennessee. When I got to Lagos, I saw the same picture. So, where these African nations, knowing the brutality that is inflicted upon black people in this country, simply because those black people are trying to get what the Supreme Court said they were supposed to have 10 years ago. I would be not a man. If I was in a position to bring it in front of the United Nations and didn't do so, I wouldn't be a man.
Do you intend to lead the charge in the United Nations?
Well, I find that to say you're going to lead something creates a lot of hostility, division, jealousy, and envy. I hope to work with any group of leaders or any group of organizations to do whatever is necessary to see this problem is brought before the United Nations.
Have you had any commitments from any nations in Africa to support?
I would rather not say at this time. But one thing I found in my travels, all of them look upon us as their long-lost brother.
You realize the implication is that you have had such commitments when you say.
This is your interpretation of what I said. One thing that I found in all of my travels was that all of the Africans, not only the Africans, but the Asians and the Muslims, look upon us as their long-lost brothers. And America had actually tricked many of them into a hands-off policy by giving them the impression that she was honestly trying to do something to solve the problem. My argument over there was designed to prove that it is impossible for the United States government to solve the race problem. It's impossible for a government which has 16 senatorial committees, over which 10 are chairman by Southern segregationists, and 20 congressional committees, over which 12 are chairman by Southern segregationists. This is a segregationist, racist government that's controlled by people from the South. They can't solve the race problem.
Do you intend to take any part in the political campaign this fall?
We intend to take part in everything that will get results at eliminating the injustices that our people are confronted with in this country. Politically, economically, anything.
Will you support candidates of either of the two parties?
We'd rather not say at this time.
Are you prepared to work with some of the leaders of the other civil rights organizations?
Certainly. We will work with any groups, organizations, or leaders in any way, as long as it's genuinely designed to get results.
And any action on the civil rights bill, how will this affect the direction of your movement?
Any action on the civil rights bill? Well, I'm surprised that all of these civil rights groups combined haven't converged on Washington long before now.
All right. So in summary, this is Malcolm X, if those of you didn't know who that was speaking, is saying that it is very strange and hypocritical for the United States at that time to talk about apartheid in South Africa when they're still mistreating his people here in America. The U.S. at that time wanted to stand up with every other nation and say, why are you doing that to those people there? Why are you doing that to those people there? Why they don't have this? Why they don't have that? And yet in their own backyard, look what they're doing to African Americans and those of African descent. So he decided he was going to take his Hajj. How many of you know about the pilgrimage that Malcolm X is taking? He did a Hajj. He went to Mecca. Upon going to Mecca, he saw that there was all types of Muslims there, not just black Muslims. And they all welcomed him and called him brother. He was thrown off by that because he wasn't being taught that in the Nation of Islam. So when that episode was done and he had an awakening, he learned about what we call the Proto-African Union. Proto means first or before, or whatever the case may be, that there were 33 heads of state from 33 African nations that were meeting at a conference in Cairo. So he said, oh, I'm about to crash this party. Because if they're all there, then certainly they are aware of what's going on to us in America. And he was saying it here is that he saw on the front page of all these nations, newspapers about black people getting beat, lynched, and killed. So surely they know our plight, and surely they're going to show some sensibility to want to work with us. That's what he thought. So what he's saying in here is that when he came back, he started his own organization, apart from the Nation of Islam, where he wanted to unite with the African nations in order to get resources to figure out the Negro problem, because once our problem is fixed, then we can go back and help Africa. So during this process, you see these white reporters asking him all of these nonsensical questions that has nothing to do with the core values that he's trying to express in here, which is uniting our people and charging the U.S. with human rights violation in front of the World Council. They're asking him, which political party are you going to join? That's not what I'm talking about. Well, what about the civil rights movement? That's not what I'm talking about. But see, this is what they do purposely to derail you off. So on live TV, black people watching this, he's sending this good message, then he gets derailed off by all these nonsensical questions. It's a great tactic, and it worked. We're about to see why. All right? Malcolm X, the catalyst for change. The black nationalist leader started his campaign July 17th in Cairo, where the 33 heads of independent African states held their second meeting since the Organization of African Unity was founded in Addis Ababa 14 months ago. Before leaving for Cairo, Malcolm told friends in New York that it was his intention to add a new dimension to the civil rights struggle in the United States. This, he said, could be achieved by internationalizing the Negro question at the United Nations in the manner that South African apartheid was transferred into an international problem. Malcolm's 8-page memorandum to the heads of state at the Cairo conference requesting their support became available here only recently. After studying it, officials said that if Malcolm succeeded in convincing just one African government to bring up the charge at the United Nations, the United States government would be faced with a touchy problem. You see that? All we needed was one ally that had a sovereign nation to bring up a charge against the United States of America to solve the Negro problem. Apparently, that didn't happen, because look where we at right now. Okay, but let's keep going. Let's keep going. He says, we in America are your long-lost brothers and sisters, and I am here to remind you that our problems are your problems. The memorandum continued. The American government is either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of your 22 million African-American brothers and sisters. We stand defenseless at the mercy of American racists who murder us at will for no reason other than that we are black and of African descent. You see, he's using these terms, internationalized and African descent, before we get this international thinking. He's the catalyst for this. He says, our problems are your problems. We have lived for over 300 years in that American den of racist wolves in constant fear of losing life and limb. Malcolm also warned the heads of African states that their countries would have no future unless the American Negro problem was solved. How do we know that? Because here in America, we are helping with the trends even in Africa. See, we got that from them through bloodline, but it was manifest through our struggle. So now they look to us for all the wrong things. We like Gucci, they want Gucci. We got a chain, they go get a chain. We rap drill music, this African drill music. Have you heard any African drill music? Man, it's crazy. It's worse. So they've always been looking to us. And there's more I can say if you read in FBZ magazine. How many of y'all read FBZ magazine back in the day? FBZ magazine had a lot of independent editorials in regards to the African struggle and our connections with West Africa. And guess what? They were bought out 10 years after reporting on these things by a white organization that shut them down. You can't make this up. It's a whole script, right? So he says, you will never be recognized as free human beings until and unless we are also recognized and treated as human beings. This is right here from the New York Times, August 13th, 1964. The article is called Malcolm X Seeks UN Negro Debate. He asks African states to cite the U.S. over rights. Any sovereign African nation could have responded and brought charges against the U.S. That's all we needed, was just one. He went to 33 of them. 33 who have newspapers showing us getting beat, lynched, flogged, bitten by dogs on their front pages. He went through these countries and saw it. He brought them the newspapers himself. And he would think like, oh, okay, they see this injustice. Maybe they want to do something to help. Okay, let's keep going. Malcolm X mentioned the United Nations topic for the last time on February 16, 1965, just days before his death. He explained the difference between civil rights and human rights. As long as you call it civil rights, your only allies can be the people in the next community, many of whom are responsible for your grievance. But when you call it human rights, it becomes international. And then you can take your troubles to the world court. You can take them before the world, and anybody, anywhere on this earth can be your ally. How did he understand this back in 1964? But even since then, we're still doing a civil rights movement. We want civil rights protection. Well, you have a ceiling when it comes to civil rights. Because the civil is tied to the society and the governance of that society to provide those rights to its citizens. And if those same powers that be are oppressing you, then what interest do they have to liberate you when they are profiting off of your oppression and your destruction? After the Civil War and Reconstruction, they didn't know what to do with us. Oh, let's find ways to put them back on a plantation. That's exactly what they did. The Convict Leasing Program, Vagrancy Act, and the Black Codes, all designed to put us back on the plantation. And it was worked. Until Black people decided we don't need them. We have all the trades. We have all the intellect. We all know the lay of the land, because a lot of us was running up north to get out of the South. So let's start building our own communities. How about we do that? And guess what? We started doing that. And then when I saw it happen, the plantation started getting empty. And what you think the ex-slave masters did? Oh, where did these Negroes go? They're not coming back here. They're not vagrant no more, meaning that after we let you off the plantation when you got emancipated, we had nowhere to go. So the ex-slave catchers became policy officers for the state and started looking for Black people doing nothing, arresting them, and then putting them in a convict leasing program, which put them back onto the plantation because the 14th Amendment only protected you from involuntary slavery. But voluntary slavery is when you give up your rights and get convicted as a felon, and now you ain't got no rights, you're back into slavery. So he understood the history and understood that we are only working inside Master's house. Master is the one oppressing us, but we were asking Master, please, Master, don't beat me today. Please, Master, can I get 2 hours to see my wife and my kids? Please, Master, can I get a whatever to go over there and go over here? Master's like, I don't feel like it today. Get back on there and do me 4 more hours. Matter of fact, your quota going up. You're asking me too much. This is what's happening here in America. But he understood we got to get outside of America to get relief in aid. If you want to read more of this, there's an article called Guilty as Charged, Malcolm X and His Vision of Racial Justice for African Americans Through Utilization of the United Nations, International Human Rights Provisions, and Institutions. It's a great article written by a Black person at Penn State International Law. This stuff is documented in law books. So what happened with that situation let me not go to Black Panther. Yeah, let me finish this. So I had to cut some of it out because I kind of figured I wouldn't have a lot of time. So when Malcolm X went to the heads of state in Cairo and said to them, hey, listen, we got this problem, Negro problem, please help us, whatever. What do you think the heads of state said to him? What do you think they said? Oh, yes, you're a long-lost brother over there in America, and we know you guys are fighting for civil rights and getting beat and eaten by dogs and so forth. Yes, we're going to jump at the rim and help you. They said, we have too many issues here to deal with the Negro problem. Sorry, we want to help, but we simply can't. And we'll wind up coming out in some COINTEL documentation. The United States sent diplomats to each one of these heads of state and went up to them like this. Hey, yo, man, that's crazy. Because you know, if we actually gave blacks reparations around that, you'd be losing some money. Hey, how much money you owe us? About $1 billion? Well, we're going to have to call it a default if we want to help them out. Because we bring us before the world court. I mean, we're going to have to call this a default. So if I want us to call that default, you got $1 billion in the bank? The IMF was already up and down. Okay, cool. All right, so you already know the answer. So if he asks you again, you know what to say, right? All right, cool, gotcha. When you have the IMF controlling all your currency, and you are billions of dollars in debt from the West, they can't do nothing. Because the moment they help you and say something, that default's getting called in, and you're going to bankrupt a whole nation. The game is rigged. So it's not that they didn't want to help. They knew that they tried to help, that the U.S. was the biggest contributor of not only the United Nations, but also all the Western powers is going to call in that default, and your whole nation is going to work. Can't feed your family. So go ahead and help them. Go ahead. And nobody jumped. So beside Malcolm X, you had the Black Panther Party, right? So they understood. Malcolm X was the catalyst to say we got to internationalize this thing. We got to get some African nations or other nations get involved in our plight, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a UN report that I don't have here for sake of time that actually shows that one of the main causes of concern to the FBI is Malcolm X getting the international community involved with the African American plight in America. That's when they heightened up security, heightened up COINTELPRO in regards to Malcolm X. And shortly after, that next year, he just happened to die. I mean, he just died. Reportedly, by Nation of Islam members, get your hand out of my pocket. Nobody better say that in here. Get your hand out of my pocket. And again, COINTEL paperwork has been made public. Now we know that those were FBI informants that killed Malcolm X because of the Negro problem being internationalized. It's not the Nation of Islam who killed him. They want you to believe that narrative. It was the fact that he was going to bring charges against the U.S. for human rights violation. So, in a book that I'm going to show you later, it says in chapter 4, Malloy explains the Black Panther Party's first attempts to cultivate more tangible alliances after Huey Newton's arrest on charges related to the shooting death of Officer John Frey in October 1967. Following the second turning point, the Black Panther Party launched an international Free Huey campaign in which leading Panthers descended on the New York headquarters of where? The United Nations to lobby third world delegations for their public support. Though ultimately unsuccessful, these efforts did result in a meeting with who? Tanzanian delegates and established other important diplomatic contacts with state-level actors. The moment that the Black Panthers were trying to get international aid, guess what? Huey P. Newton was free. Remember that? Free Huey? How many of y'all remember that? Okay, I don't want you to say your age or nothing like that, but have you seen it on TV sometime on YouTube or something? How in the world did you get a black man who's a Black Panther who had that bad reputation in society kill a police officer and get off? International allies. When they realized that he was going outside the United States and the organization was going outside the United States, it was like, damn, the whole world's watching this. Let's let him off the hook. You see that? That's what power is at. Because if the international community wasn't involved, you think he would have got exonerated for that crime? How many of y'all in here could shoot a police officer and say it was self-defense and think that you about to get out? The jury's gonna say, yeah, he's innocent, let him out. Tupac. But Tupac had international allies as well. His music went across the world. So the world's eye was on him. See, when you have the world's eye behind you on a matter, the U.S. will tread lightly. Okay. If you want to read more about that, there's a book called Out of Oakland, Black Panther Party Internationalism During the Cold War by Sean L. Malloy. Excellent, excellent book. Again, what I'm trying to show you is that most of these quote-unquote struggle movements and leaders understood the power in international alliances. Why don't we? Why don't we? Okay? I'm going to skip past this, but pretty much what this is showing you that Malcolm X, because he went to the United Nations first, the NAACP went after him. Like after he went, they also went, wrote a memorandum, said, hey, y'all need to do something. The Black Panther Party did their Free Human New campaign, went to the United Nations and started sending them paperwork and said, y'all need to do something. All of a sudden, all these groups just started doing something because of what Malcolm did. Understanding that the plight had to be international. It had to be. That's your only way to solve the problem. So now, after Malcolm died, obviously, then we had in 2020, we had police brutality incidents occur in 2020, right? You remember that? Right in the middle of COVID, people outside saying, fight the power, black power, free, Black Lives Matter and all of that stuff, right? Well, it says here, protesters in the streets across the U.S. and worldwide to denounce racism and police brutality, internationalizing the issue the way Malcolm X envisioned it. Remember that 2020 thing? People in Germany said, Black Lives Matter. Germany? Y'all care about what's going on over here? France, Black Lives Matter. What? Australia, Black Lives Matter. Whoa, look at this momentum here. And guess what? We screwed it up. Because you know what? We didn't have a plan after the protests. If you failed to plan to fail. Woo! That's deep. We had all this momentum. Remember that? The whole world was watching us. Where's everything now? Black people don't know how to organize efficiently. That is our downfall. Not our genius, our skills, our talents, our intellect. It's lack of organization internationally. There's no nation called Black on this earth. Okay. Let me see. Anything here I want to grow? It says it has been a long run for the African Americans to get their cause directly heard at the world's highest platform for civil rights. What does it say there? Civil rights. Human rights. Civil rights is not the way. Human rights, and it happens as the U.S. is distancing itself from what? The UN. Oh, these Negroes are starting to get international. Hey, look, we don't want to be involved in this UN stuff. We're going to move back a little bit. No, because they understand what's coming next. You about to get sanctioned. You about to get embargoed. You about to have some problems. The same way you was rooting for apartheid here, rooting for what's going on in Hungary with the Slavic people and all of that. Now it's your turn. It says the U.S. stormed out of the Human Rights Council in June 2018, citing its chronic bias against Israel. So the world was talking about how Israel was treating the Palestinians. This touchy subject now, right? And the U.S. mistreatment of Black people. So when the UN started to band together and talk about these sensitive issues, the U.S. is like, yo, Israel, we out. We out. We're not going to stay here for this. They can't even handle the pressure. You think U.S. is the most gangster nation on earth. Once we form against them, they tuck tail and run. You see that? When you hear those songs I play, and I curated that playlist, by the way, I got old soul, right? Power to the people, more power to the people. You ever seen that meme where the people are bent over like this and they got a table on top of them and the European nations is playing chess on top of them? It says all they got to do is stand up. The game is over. All right. So there's one thing here I want to read that's very, very important. Let me see if it's here. All right. One expert in Geneva described the U.S. as part of a handful of untouchable countries when it comes to human rights. And the council addresses the issue comes as a surprise. As such, it will look at the topic through a global perspective. Malcolm X was not the first African American to ask the UN to look at the plight of Blacks in the U.S. A year after the UN Charter was signed in 1945, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, submitted a 96-page petition asking the new organization to look at the matter unsuccessfully. After the Third World Conference against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance in 2001, the UN established a working group of experts on the people of African descent. All of a sudden, in 2001, going from 1964, how many years is that? I don't know, it's almost 50 years. It took for them to actually say, oh, okay, well, let's look to see what's going on in America too. You know, maybe some issues there. And guess what? Black people in Israel were being oppressed as well. That was another issue if you read the documents that the UN was talking about. Our people in Israel being oppressed. Okay. All right. All right, let me see. Anything else? Yeah, so it's saying countries like Russia and Cuba have supported the cause of African Americans' equal rights in the U.S., especially during the height of the Cold War. That's why you'll see a lot of news coverage in these nations here, Cuba and Russia, in regards to our plight in America. They was offering us everything. You remember that in the Cuban Missile Crisis? They were telling black people to get out of America. You can come here because Russia was planning to nuke America. And they didn't want us to get killed. Why is that? Because they also have a populace of Africans in the diaspora in Brazil, in Cuba. Brazil too. Brazil is like #1. But in Cuba, so they were saying the best way to get at the U.S. is look at the disenfranchised people in that country and get them as allies. But you know what? U.S. propaganda said Cuba bad, America good. Why you want to go help Cuba? They're communists. Try to scare black people. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll stay out of there. Everybody that try to help us, they say something bad about that nation. Everybody. Even Gaddafi. Gaddafi wanted to unite the African diaspora as the 6th division of the African Union. He wanted to give us gold instead of the American dollar. He wanted us to get us land and access to oil and resources. Well, 2 years later, after he said that, Gaddafi's not here no more. I'm just saying, it looks like a coincidence. Maybe it's not. All right, so if you want to read more about this, you can get in the Human Rights Council Confronts Racism in the U.S. from Past Blue, which is content from the UN, the official reported organization for the UN, okay? Very great article. Please read the whole thing, all right? Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. All right, so from Malcolm to the United Nations International Decade of People of African Descent, how a small spark set off a forest fire, right? That's what I just read for y'all. We're going to transition to the actual initiative. So now, in 2001, like I shared in that video, the Durban Conference, which is one of many places that the UN goes to convene, decided we're going to deal with racism, xenophobia, related intolerances, discrimination in all the countries in the world that have people of African descent, including the United States. The United States has never been on the table for any kind of human rights violation in the inception of the UN. Until 1948. The UN was created and they never dealt with the Negro problem in America. But let the US deal with everything else. Why? Because in that article it says the US is the biggest contributor to the United Nations monetarily. They put that money in their pocket and say, shut up, look that way. Oh, well, you see what they're doing over here? And then they go to us. Oh, no, over there, look what they're doing over there in that country. You see that? They go back to us. And everybody just turns a blind eye. But now, because of social media, the internet, and just us traveling and so forth, now we're bringing attention to this plight. And it took the situations happening in 2013, 14, 15, of police brutality to get the entire world to say, hey, because look, they did this in 2001 is when they just talked about it and debated it. It's like, oh, it's not going to go nowhere. That's what everybody said. It's not really going to go nowhere. In 2013, 12, 13, 14, when we started getting more police brutality incidents and it started going on across social media and internationally, now the U.S. say, hey, okay, U.S., we know you're the biggest contributor, but hey, we got a big problem here because these other nations are telling their diplomats, y'all better do something about it, or we're going to protest, or we're going to stop driving trucks, or we're going to stop doing this and that. They actually helped us. But you know what? They make you ignorant of this. You think the government has this on the media showing y'all this? A lot of y'all didn't even know this program existed. How many of y'all knew it existed before this year? Raise your hand. You didn't see it on social media? You didn't hear it on the radio? You didn't see it in the movie theater? You know, they put it on the trailers before the movie starts. In regards to the Justice Initiative, this means introducing measures to ensure equality before the law, notably the enjoyment of the right to equal treatment before tribunals and all organs of administrative justice. We never have that opportunity. Designing, implementing, and enforcing effective measures to eliminate the phenomenon popularly known as racial profiling. How many of you have been racial profiled recently? Raise your hand. Everybody's hand should be up. Eliminate, because sometimes it's silence and it's invisible, but it's happening. Eliminating institutionalized stereotypes concerning people of African descent and applying appropriate sanctions against law enforcement officials who act on the basis of racial profiling. The last time I got stopped and frisked in New York was 12 years ago. Just for being black, just for walking. They don't have it no more, right? They won't stop and frisk. But at that time they did. There was who can I tell about that? Go to the police precinct and write a report. Hey, y'all, y'all racial profile me and just stop and frisk to me. Ensuring that people of African descent have full access to effective protections and remedies through the competent national tribunals and other state institutions against any acts of racial discrimination, and the right to seek from such tribunals just and adequate reparation or satisfaction for any damage suffered as a result of such discrimination. How many of you got paid after you got racial profiling? Got compensation for it? Nobody? I don't know. Y'all not doing your job, man. Let me know what's going on. Adopting effective and appropriate measures, including legal measures, as appropriate to combat all acts of racism, facilitating access to justice for people of African descent. That means you don't have to get a public defender. Okay. Preventing and punishing all human rights. I should have had the Punisher here. All human rights violations affecting people of African descent, including violence, acts of torture, inhuman or degrading treatment, including those committed by who? Y'all didn't know this was available to y'all? What y'all doing out here? Y'all sleeping? Man, this is crazy. Ensuring that people of African descent, like all the persons, enjoy all guarantees of a fair trial and equality before the law as enshrined in the relevant international human rights instruments. Acknowledging and profoundly regretting the untold suffering and evils inflicted on millions of men, women, and children as a result of slavery, the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, apartheid, genocide, and past tragedies. Noting that some states have taken the initiative to apologize and have paid reparation where appropriate for grave and massive violations committed. And y'all say that the UN is evil, but the people that came up with this were people of color. Y'all think the white man is in control of everything. He's a big boogeyman to everybody. He had nothing to do with this. They put pressure on those Western nations who signed this. Okay, I'm gonna move forward because for lack of time. I'm gonna read this. Special measures. The adoption of special measures such as affirmative action, which we have. U.S. was like, yeah, they got affirmative action, so they're good. Nah. Where appropriate is essential to alleviating and remedying disparities in the enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms affecting people of African descent, protecting them from discrimination, and overcoming persistent or structural disparities and de facto inequalities resulting from historical circumstances. As such, states should develop or elaborate national plans of action to promote diversity, equality, social justice, equality of opportunity, and the participation of all by means of inter alia, affirmative, or positive action. The strategies these plans should aim at creating conditions for all to participate effectively. That means you get to say so what happens in decision making to realize civil, cultural, economic, political, social rights in all spheres of life on the basis of non-discrimination. Some people in here identify as Moors, some people in here identify as Muslims, some people in here identify as Israelites, etc., Christians, and so forth. But did you know that you can get cultural protection? That means when you want to recognize as something, if the media misinterprets your purpose or your efforts, they can shame you, they can talk bad about you, write bad in the papers and all of that, because guess what? You're not recognized internationally as an organization that deserves respect. So we could say whatever we want about you. However, if internationally we get recognized as a legitimate, recognized ethnic group in America, all of that will stop. Because now you have a point of contact to report this to. That's still our reality today. And a lot of y'all just sitting comfortably in your homes, not even realizing the solution to fix all these problems. Okay. So I'm gonna wrap it up. I only got a few minutes, I think about 5 more minutes. The United Nations. So as part of this International Decade for People Africans in this program, the United Nations created a organization within the organization under the High Office of the Human Rights Council called the Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent. They came in 2016 to visit the United States. They go visit all the member nations that agreed to this resolution. And they write a report based on things that they find, their findings, right? And they report it back to the UN to see whether or not the US is actually doing something, right? How many of you think the US is doing something? Raise your hand. Wow, y'all must be prophets in here and prophetesses, I don't know. But the US didn't do anything. The report transmitted hearing contains the findings of the Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent on its visit to the United States of America from the 19th to the 29th of January 2016. In it, the working group presents the current legal, institutional, and policy framework and measures taken to prevent racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, Afrophobia, and related intolerance faced by people of African descent in the United States. And they scored them based on good things they're doing and bad things that's going on, okay? Then they go in and talk about the history, right? Which I'm not going to read all of it, but they talk about the history of people of African descent in the United States is well documented. Just keep that in mind, okay? Then it talks about, despite these legal and constitutional developments, after the Civil War, the prevalence of Jim Crow laws at the state and local levels that enforce racial segregation and persecution, primarily in southern states, perpetuated political disenfranchisement, social and economic exploitation, and violence in the overall subjugation of people of the African descent until the 1960s. Lynching was a form of racial terrorism that has contributed to a legacy of racial inequality that the United States must address. Thousands of people of African descent were killed in violent public acts and racial control and dominated, and the perpetrators were never held accountable. Despite substantial changes since the end of the enforcement of Jim Crow and the fight for civil rights, a systemic ideology of racism ensuring the domination of one group over another continues to impact negatively on the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights of African Americans today. The UN is writing about this. You don't think they know what's going on over here? Up until what, 2016? There was a black person that actually wrote this. That was the head of this group that wrote this, a black woman. So the head of this group that wrote this. We got our people in there reporting this. So it's not, everybody knows about it. The United States has not signed, watch this, has not signed and ratified any of the human rights treaties that would allow United States citizens to present individual complaints to the United Nations Human Rights Treaty bodies or the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. The United States is subject to the individual complaints procedure and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Owing to these factors, human rights treaties are generally not recognized as giving rise to individually enforceable rights in United States courts. And the reason why the United States is not signing nothing is they know that if we find out that we can do something about it, they're in trouble. So they just don't sign nothing because they know we're waking up. And look, the UN is reporting all of this, right? They talk about they're deeply concerned at the alarming levels of police brutality and excessive use of lethal force. The working group is deeply concerned about low number of cases where police officers have been held accountable for these crimes despite the evidence. Killings of unarmed African Americans by the police is only the tip of the iceberg and what is a pervasive racial bias in the justice system. The working group is deeply concerned at the alarming level of police brutality and excessive use of lethal force by police enforcement officials committed with impunity against people of African descent in the United States. The working group was also informed about the serious disadvantage that individuals with criminal records or a history of incarceration face when they go back to their communities. You said that what you and your husband like to do, reintroduce it. Well, they already know that's the problem. Go back to the communities and access employment, housing, health, safety, net programs, and welfare assistance. You see this? Look at this right here. It says that a men with a criminal record had more positive responses in job application than African American men with no criminal record, talking about white counterparts. They have more job opportunities getting out of prison than we do. Why is that? You committed a crime just like me. Okay. It says that it says 28 individuals with records of low-level nonviolent offenses may be denied public housing assistance, and individuals with a felony drug record are fully or partially excluded from food stamps. So what do you expect them to do to go feed their family? And you're trying to wonder why all these felons are on the street corner hustling. They can't go just like you to welfare and say, hey, I need all of this, this, and that. I need this too and that too. Oh, you got a record. They're going to give you a little bit, small percentage. Hey, hold that. You good. Right? So, what has the United States done so far to implement the program? Well, when they did a report as of 2023, the U.S. says that they may do something. They may. If we feel like it. In the United States of America, the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice may investigate and bring suits against agencies that engage in or exhibit patterns or adopt practice of racial profiling in violation of the Constitution. We may do it if we feel like it. So are you still waiting on your government to save you? Okay, I'm around up here. So what can we do here about that thing? Here's a solution and I'm done. I'm still good on time and I'm done. What do you think we could do about that with this program? Anybody familiar with what we can do about that? All right, plan of action, course of action, but what? So the way that this works with other nations that have other groups of people that have been oppressed, right? And the UN has made all of these resolutions and programs and all of this stuff. They do this and we don't do this because we don't even know we could do this. First step is register and get your NGO. What's the NGO? That includes grassroots movements and all that, right? Nonprofit and voluntary organizations, ECOSOC accreditation with the United Nations. Do you know what that is? You're not ECOSOC accredited? You're incorporated, but you're not ECOSOC accredited? Man, that's crazy. That's why you ain't got no voice in the UN. 7 representatives from our communities joined the Fellowship Program for People of African Descent. Somebody tell me what that is. Raise your hand. Man, that's crazy. Form a line of communication with the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent for advice on how to get international aid support on rectifying these issues and removing any additional barriers in opposition to the program. Integrate policies in our non-governmental organizations, nonprofit, religious organizations, etc., charter in alignment with the program's initiatives and carry them out. Why? Because this grandfathered you into this protection. And lastly, look for instances in our day-to-day live activities and communities where these initiatives are being violated or not implemented and take action to address them within the existing state-federal paradigms. And if that fails, you go to the international level. It's one of the major platforms for NGOs to work with the United Nations through a consultative relationship with Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. So when you are ECOSOC accredited, now when something happens in your community, you can voice it at the UN and it will be heard by diplomats of other nations. Okay, y'all don't know about that. Okay, cool. All right. Then it says, what is the Fellowship Program for People of African Descent? Well, I think I got that mixed up over there. But what that is that it's a fellowship program where you take a representative of your organization or your community grassroots movement. It takes like what? 30 minutes to create something like that, and they get sent to the UN, you apply, you get approved, they bring it to Geneva, and they tell you everything that needs to be done to fix whatever problem that you're experiencing in your community, and get international aid and support for it. How many of y'all sent the application? Raise your hand. How many of y'all got organizations in here, nonprofits, LLCs? How many of y'all got that? You got that, but you're not, so you don't got representatives in the UN? Man, that's crazy. Huh? And I think lastly, before I get to what we're doing, what is a permanent forum on people of African descent? On August 2nd, the General Assembly adopted resolution and so forth, in which it formally operationalized the permanent forum as a what? Consultative mechanism for people of African descent and other relevant stakeholders as a platform for improving the safety and quality of life and livelihood of people of African descent, as well as an advisory board to the Human Rights Council in line with the program of activities for the implementation of the International Decade for People of African descent and in close coordination with the existing mechanisms. That means when you have that fellowship program and you're accredited, then you get access to them directly, direct line to them. Hey, yo, this is what's going on over here. You send out a kite. Hey, I need some help. They say, okay, we're going to get the answer for you. Then they go get the answer for you. And guess what? Things magically change. All of a sudden, the state barriers, city barriers, all of that changes. All of a sudden, it's like, God put his hand down and said, okay, we're going to move all of this stuff for you to go ahead. Go ahead. Lastly, and ending here, what are we doing? KHM. I've known about this program for almost 10 years. These are the 5 things that we're doing, and then I'm closing out. I think my time is ending. Creating domestic and foreign chapters here and abroad to apply the program's initiatives to resolve those issues. Becoming a registered NGO, right? That's our goal. Getting representatives to become fellows. We attempted to do that before, right? And we almost had it, but you got to constantly keep doing it. And forming a direct line of communication, which we've attempted on previous times to get that established as well with a permanent forum. Creating programs and services to alleviate the societal ills of people of African descent in accordance with the International Decade for People of African Descent. Advocating for the implementation of this program to the United States, federal government, and state governments, and bringing awareness to the public via events, lectures, and social media, etc., because your government has failed you, don't care nothing about you, and don't want to say anything about these solutions for your community. So with that, what are you going to do? Because I'm done right now. What are you going to do? Yes.
Question. So I see that it had dates on it, expiration date.
Correct.
2024. So what happens moving past 2024?
What happens past 24? The UN, the World Council says, okay, just move that off the table. Hey, you guys, y'all handle that. Move it off the table and deal with the next human rights violation issue. We had since 2015 to do something about this. COVID hit us 3 years. The UN did not open their doors to even talk about this for 3 years.
You mentioned about your grandfathers.
Yeah, so if you cite this program before the end of the year, then you are entitled to get priority attention to these issues and these remedies. Yes.
And the permanent forum is seeking a second decade, and they're going to be in April.
Say it again.
I said.
That answers your question.
The permanent forum is seeking a second decade. They say that there's so much that has happened, it's definitely going to take more than 1 decade, and they will be meeting and deliberating on that in April.
Next month. So next month, if we get our way, we get 10 more years. Now that you know about it, I gave you the whole blueprint on what to do. If they say no, you got limited options. So get started on these things now. Yes.
Yeah, bro, let me ask you a question. No army should have enough financial funding to wreak havoc on our community. So you did mention inside this presentation right here about sanctioning the police department.
Correct.
Is that similar to the funding of police? Or is that
No, the funding is done at the city or county or state level. This has nothing to do with that. That's putting pressure on the federal government to get involved in sanctioning and or scrutinizing the activities that's happening at the state, county, and local level. Because when you defund, it's only from a citizen of the state to either the city, township, county, or even state itself, but it doesn't go beyond that because the state too has their sovereignty, right? But this will put pressure on the federal government to deal with this as a human rights violation. And now the federal government has to get involved and they have to investigate these matters that are happening locally here in whatever state that we dwell in, right? You're welcome. And I'm gonna close out here. I want to ask some more questions here. I gotta pass it on to our 2 guests of honor. And then after they're done, while we talking around, we can ask questions and stuff like that, okay? So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time.